They're challenging in terms of power, they're challenging in terms of space, they're challenging in terms of cooling. Our solution to customer challenges is what we refer to as converged infrastructure. And converged infrastructure is all about enabling the customer to virtualize that environment and to provide true shared services out of that environment. So for example, when the customer wants to roll out a new application, is they simply say how much server capacity and performance they need, what networking connection they need, what storage they need, and do that all in a very orchestrated and organised way, which is a very different approach than the way they do it today. Typically, it could take 2+ weeks to roll out a new application simply because they have to line up all those bricks independently to get those resources organised. So one of the areas that we're going to spend quite a lot of time on today is around this power and cooling piece. And we had a technology as an alternative to traditional data centres that can absolutely optimise the efficiencies that can be provided out of the data centre. And I'm going to spend some more time talking about that. So as I travel around the region, and there are differences country by country. So sometimes you might find in Australia the challenges that a customer might have with a data centre is slightly different than those in India, or slightly different in China. However, what I find is there's around 5 common themes that come out. The first one is we've run out of space. We just don't have any more physical space to house server storage and networking equipment. The other is that we have the space. In fact, we've got lots of space. However, the actual data centre itself just does not have anywhere near the amount of power or cooling to actually house modern equipment today. The other one is slightly related, which is more that the data centre itself has aged to the point where it just can't handle the capacity and the performance of the latest equipment. And that could be just not power, it may not be just space, it could also be weight. So weight is also becoming a challenge that many data centres face. The other thing that I hear from customers is cost. It's costing so much from a power and cooling perspective to just actually power the equipment that we have in our data centre, so that's becoming quite important as well. And one that started to surface some couple of years ago into the global financial crisis was around green carbon credits. We're starting to see that come back on the agenda again, where the CEOs and the management teams of large corporations and government departments are now saying that we need to become carbon neutral. So we're finding again as that's coming to the forefront in terms of some of the challenges that organisations are facing in relation to their infrastructure. So why a HP pod? HP pod is actually a technology and a solution that can help customers conquer some of the challenges that they have in terms of facilities. So let me just talk about, I like to group it in a couple of areas. The first one is around construction and acquisition costs. So if a customer was looking today to either refurb an aging data centre or to build a new data centre, the cost of doing that is quite expensive. If you look at pod as a technology, it comes at a much lower price point. The next area is around construction time. So a typical data centre would take somewhere between, let's say you're doing a refresh of the data centre, it could be 6 to 12 months. Let's say you're building a new data centre from day one in terms of planning, working out where that data centre is going to be, what size, what capacity, what your future requirements are. It could be anywhere from 1 to 2 years before that data centre is up and functioning. However, with a pod, we're able to do that in a matter of weeks. And you will hear from Chris later about their experience in deploying the pod and how long it took them from the planning stage to actually having the pod up and functioning as it is today. The other area is around operational efficiency. So if you look at most data centres, they're measured in terms of a rating, which is a PUE, which is a power utilisation or power usage efficiency. So that's the rating. And most data centres, a very good data centre, will have a rating somewhere between 1.7 to about 2. However, many data centres out there, the rating will be 2, 3 to 3, depending on how old that data centre is in efficiency. What does it actually mean? What it means is how much power you need to actually power the data center, but also power the equipment. So here's the example. If a data center has a rating of 2, it actually means that you need double the power going into the data center than is actually required for the actual servers and storage and infrastructure that's in that data center. So you're getting a lot of wastage in terms of power going in, for cooling, and for other leakage. Where if you look at a pod, the PUE of a pod is 1.25. So you can see that it's very, very efficient. And as we go through the course of the day, as you get the opportunity to see the pod, you'll see why it is actually so efficient as far as its PUE rating. Equipment density. So one of the challenges that we're finding today is how do we scale our environment? How do we have a data center that is able to handle the density of equipment? So if you look at a pod from a density perspective, you can fit a lot more equipment into a pod than what you can into a traditional data center that many customers have deployed today. And the final one, which sort of comes to acquisition cost, is the modularity concept. And when you see it today, you will see what it's able to offer in terms of it's a modular concept. So if a customer is not quite sure how much am I going to need to scale, and VerBIT is an example of that. It is starting that has the opportunity, as their business grows, as they start to provide more services to customers, is they can start to grow quite easily and very, very quickly based on the modular concept of the pod. That helps keep initial capital expenditure down because the customer doesn't need to look at building a very, very good data center up front, having a small amount of equipment in it, and the rest of the data center is sitting there as vacant space until their needs grow into that. So the pod key features. So if you take a look at the pod, they actually they come in 2 models today. So we have a 20-foot pod, which you will see. We also have a 40-foot pod, and we have a roadmap. So this is not about one technology or 2 technologies. This is about a roadmap in terms of pods that we have available. The pod takes standard 19-inch racks. And what that means is that any equipment that fits into a 19-inch rack can be actually housed into the pod. Now, I would like that to be all HP equipment. However, I'm pragmatic enough to know that customers have a mix of vendors that they deal with. So if that equipment is able to go into a 19-inch rack, it will be supported in the pod. On top of that is that we can customise the pod for equipment that does or is not able to go into a 19-inch rack. So it can also be purposely customised for that. Best-in-class density. So you'll see that today in terms of the capacity that we're able to offer out of the pod. I spoke to energy efficiency, built-in redundancy within the pod, and then we have a range of service offerings. So those service offerings start from an assessment in terms of what the customer's requirements are, what do they have today in terms of service storage, what would they like to do from a business perspective. So that's an assessment service. From there, once we've agreed on the pod is the best technology to meet that customer or that business requirement, the pod is then assembled, manufactured, shipped to the site, installed on the site, and then from there we have full life cycle services in terms of managing that pod on an ongoing basis. I haven't listed customers up here, but I thought it was important, and today you're hearing a customer side, I thought it was important to give you a perspective on what we're seeing in terms of the installation so far, where those customers are actually deploying pods. So the first example is around high-performance computing. So we're seeing the pod be very attractive for high-performance computing environments. And you may have seen around 2 weeks ago some press on IBEC, which is a pod installation which will be going into Western Australia. It's currently on its way to Western Australia. It's been configured and on its way. So if you'd like some more information on that, we can provide you with it. But that's an example of a pod used in a high-performance computing environment. The other example is cloud computing environments, or alternatively infrastructure as a service. And today, when you hear from Chris and you see what VerBIT are doing, this is very much the space that they're playing in. It's providing cloud-based and infrastructure-based services out of the pod. The other area is private cloud. So one of the challenges that many customers have moving to a shared service model is that sometimes it's difficult for them to get business groups to cooperate. So a business group, for example, has its application, it has its servers, it has its storage, and sometimes they like to own that. So one of the challenges sometimes IT have is that they go to the business says it sounds great, but you need to show me how this could work with other businesses. So we're starting to see some customers are taking a pod, building a private-based cloud for the businesses, and then saying to the businesses, tell me what you would like from an application perspective, and we'll show you and demonstrate to you how it works. So it's a way of starting to break some of those barriers down and keep it contained. And the other areas around data centre expansion. So I spoke to the fact that many data centres are running out of space, or many data centres don't have the amount of power and cooling. It's a very quick, easy, modular, efficient way for customers to deploy a pod and get themselves over that current hurdle that they may have. So I just really wanted to close out in terms of our converged infrastructure message. Pod is very much an example of what we refer to as converged infrastructure, and what you will see today is that you will see a real working example of converged infrastructure. Everything from power through to networking, through to storage, through to management tools, all being operated and delivered as a shared service model to customers. And this is where I like to say, why HP? Why HP is because if you look at our portfolio, is that we have networking, we have storage, we have management, we have power and cooling technologies. Many of those power and cooling technologies. So for today, for example, you will see in a data center environment that some of those power and cooling technologies are right down at a server and down at the storage level, where what we're providing is abilities for customers to actually reduce their overall consumption of power right down at the chip level, the ability to be able to power cooling fan, or to turn cooling fans off and on based on whether or not the equipment needs it, the ability to be able to cap equipment's capacity in terms of what power that it's drawing, and Chris will speak to that in terms of some of the work that they've done around individual elements and the cost savings you can get from that. So if I look at where HP, I believe, can offer customers a fantastic opportunity to move to a converged-based infrastructure, which is what customers are looking for today, to reduce their management costs, increase their overall efficiencies, but also move more of their IT from managing things, actually moving it into actually innovating. And whether that be innovating into the IT environment, or innovating in terms of new applications for the businesses that they're out there representing, helping them grow in the marketplace, or providing, in the government case, services to the public. And where HP has the capability is not only within these technologies, but at the grassroots level within those technologies, so we can and bring all this together to offer a true converged infrastructure.